So this is really kind of an unexpected presentation in that, well, we presented on Wupatki last year and thought we had the project well in hand. We presented on the 121 rock art panels that we had documented at Horseshoe Mesa, a collaborative project between the Museum of Northern Arizona and the National Park Service Flagstaff Area National Monuments. After Pecos last year, we went home, we finished the report, we put together 5 binders of color photographic prints, 2 binders of black and white prints and negatives, and 2 boxes with all the paper documentation that we had done. And happily discovered that we had done the whole project for a lot less money than we had budgeted. Additionally, and how often does that happen? Never. Additionally, before she departed for Dinosaur National Monument, Lisa Baldwin had secured for us a nice pot of end-of-year money. Combining those two, we realized that we were going to be able to go back out the horrible road to Kraken Rock and do 2 more sites this last year. So we expanded the scope of our project and extended our deadline. We went out to WS 835, which is a small mesa that's just to the south of Horseshoe Mesa where we had worked previously, and WS 833, which is Middle Mesa, which is the one north of Horseshoe Mesa, the next one in line towards Kraken Rock Pueblo. And the results were pretty interesting. We now have 3 sites with a lot of rock art where we can compare and contrast what's going on there. So at WS 835, we have 7 panels with 58 elements. All of them are ancestral Puebloan. We did not see any of the archaic component that we had seen at Horseshoe Mesa. We didn't see any of the historic Navajo component, which is kind of interesting because they had managed, the historic Navajo folks, had managed to turn the entire top of that little mesa into a giant animal pen. There's a beautiful ramp that leads up to the top and a nice little juniper branch gate that blocks it off. Unfortunately, on our way walking back from WS 835 to go record at Middle Mesa, somebody, Brian Kranzler, strangle him, found another panel at Horseshoe Mesa. So now we're up to 122 and 1,134 individual petroglyph elements there, but they were kind of interesting little zoomorphs. In addition, during the course of all this, we have continued to do some studies of possible solstice and equinox markers at Horseshoe Mesa. We have been able to reject a few panels. Having looked at them, we've done time-lapse and video photographs of those on solstices and equinoxes, except for the winter solstice. We still have to get out there and do that. But that is ongoing research that we're going to continue to pursue over the next several years. Now, at Middle Mesa, originally, the Wupatki Archaeological Inventory Survey had documented 19 panels. And what we discovered is that I think in the face of deadline pressure, the system that they had put in place at Horseshoe Mesa were basically one cliff exposure, one group of elements equal to panel. Nope, that went out the window when they got to Middle Mesa, and we found multiple cliff exposures down tens of meters of the cliff face with one panel number. So we ended up breaking those 19 up into 53 panels. Additionally, interspersed amidst all of those, as at Horseshoe, we found a number of previously overlooked panels. So there's actually 108 different panels at Middle Mesa. I say 108, the next time we go out, we'll find another one. That's bound to happen, but there are 1,173 rock markings. One of them is an abraded groove. All the rest of those are petroglyphs. So the pattern that we're seeing over these 3 sites, no pictographs. We're seeing that most of the panels typically have 12 or fewer elements, but that most of the elements are on very big panels. And this is held up at Middle Mesa very well. The largest panel there has 117 individual elements. And that panel itself is actually part of one of the ones that we broke up, panel 10, we broke up into 10 individual panels, and they form what we've sort of informally called the amphitheater. It's a U-shaped area in the center of the mesa with rock art on every single surface imaginable. And we think it's there in part because this is a spot where you can actually climb from the south side of Middle Mesa over to the north side. So it's an access way across the mesa. I think looking at the differences, though, in the types of rock art that you see at Middle Mesa versus Horseshoe is very informative. Again, we don't have the archaic component at Middle Mesa, but we do have a lot of ancestral Puebloan rock art, as at Horseshoe, but we're not getting nearly as much historic Navajo rock art. And there are Navajo features at Middle Mesa. Again, part of the mesa top was used as an animal pen. There are several masonry structures that actually look like hogans, historic hogans, but Whereas at Horseshoe Mesa, we had a number of panels that had very large scratched horse designs or scenes involving cowboys, horses with brands. None of that at Middle Mesa. We have just a few that are recognizably Navajo. One of the things that we have, though, that's very different is we have some historic Euro-American rock art that dates back as early as 1899. And in fact, there's one large panel that includes a number of dates, names, even inscriptions, and we can trace this to a visit on August 1st, 1899, by a man named L.N. Goode, G-O-O-D-E, and his apparently high school and college-aged sons, as well as probably some cowboys from the Babbitt ranches. There's a hash knife ranch brand on this panel. What makes this interesting is that L.N. Goode was one of the principal financiers of both the Anita Mine south of Tucson and the Grand Canyon Railway. He was partnered with Bucky O'Neill, the Yavapai County Sheriff and Rough Rider, who was killed in Cuba just about a year before that in 1898. We know that these were his sons, and we know about how old they were because one left an inscription saying that he was in the class of '01 at the Columbia University School of Mines, which is, I hadn't realized, one of the oldest schools of mines and engineering in the United States. His brother left an inscription that indicated that he was attending Boys High School in Brooklyn, which is still in existence as the Boys and Girls High School in Brooklyn. Now, what's particularly interesting about this isn't necessarily the association with historical developments in northern Arizona. It's that they obviously were testing out different rock art methods on this panel. So part of it is scratched, part of it is directly pecked, and part of it is indirectly pecked. In fact, one of the sons' names is very nicely done, indirect pecking. Where am I going with this? On the north side of Middle Mesa is probably the most famous single element at the site, the infamous fire-breathing dragon. This has been published before in a number of different magazines and books, and it looks for all the world like a fire-breathing dragon. When the Wupatki Archaeological Inventory Survey recorded this back in the early 80s, they commented on the fact that it wasn't weathered, it wasn't patinated, they couldn't account for who had made it, but it pretty clearly was not ancestral Puebloan in age. And I would submit that this is probably something that these kids left as a prank when they were visiting the site. There's one other panel that has another anomalous, obviously fresh element, and I think that was probably part of what they were doing. So in conclusion, what I would like to say is that our research is ongoing because I'm happy to report that once again we got our work at these two sites done well within budget. We've gotten a little bit more end-of-year money coming. So we're going to go out this fall and assist NAU graduate student Corey Fournier in finishing his documentation at Kraken Rock. Corey has been working on this for his master's thesis. He's been using the same forms and methods that we have used throughout this project, and in fact, he worked with us at Middle Mesa so that we were all using exactly the same techniques. He's identified 96 panels thus far at Kraken Rock, but Kraken Rock's kind of unique because some of these panels are actually very tall. They were standing on ladders or they had multi-room habitations, and so some of the elements are as high as 25 feet above the ground. And we are working right now with Flagstaff Area National Monuments to try to figure out how to get up to those and do the same kind of detailed measurements and photos with scales in them that we've been doing at all these other sites. And we have a meeting coming up on that. And the reason I mentioned Kraken Rock is that a lot of you members of Archaeology Southwest, and you've probably recently received their Archaeology Southwest magazine that has a huge photo of the biggest panel there at Kraken Rock Pueblo. And you were probably also, like me, kind of a little disappointed when you opened it up and there were no articles on Wupatki rock art and there was nothing on our project. Well, I'm happy to report that the museum director, Carrie Heinonen, has authorized us to do an entire issue of the museum's magazine, Plateau, which should be available this coming year on this project. And this will be an outgrowth of the exhibition that we put together this winter, which is still up at the museum, entitled Images on Stone. And yes, I know we borrowed Don Weaver's old Plateau title for that. But so please look for the next issue of Plateau, and I'm looking very forward to standing up here next year and reporting on the final season of our Wupatki petroglyph recording project. Thank you.